So I'm Scott Krawczyk. I am a retired Army officer who was the head of English and Philosophy Department at the United States Military Academy at West Point. I'm an author. I wrote Romantic Literary Families, published in 2009. I'm an adjunct currently teaching English courses here at Georgetown. And I'm also director of Federal State Partnership at the National Endowment for the Humanities. One of the things that we heard during the discussions last night and even today had to do with the reproduction model and the need to get away from reproducing graduate students in the image of their professors who've been in the academic world for a very long time in most cases. And those tracks into which many graduate students find themselves, there's nothing wrong with those tracks, but one-size-fits-all model is not acceptable. It won't be acceptable. It's not sustainable for the future. So one of the phrases I loved hearing, I think it was today, was that the person who said this said, I was much more interested in social humanities. I was much more interested in, not in the traditional departmental stovepipe humanities world and tenure track environment, but making relevant my work, my passion to the larger world. And really what she was talking about was public humanities. So one of the problems that we have, though, with models that say there will be this many distribution requirements and then you're going to go through these stages and you're going to write your dissertation and be on the market and we will coach you in those ways, is that we've not left room for other kinds of awareness, other kinds of education, other kinds of tracks for employment. Now, this has been touched on a couple of times. Even today we heard about, anecdotally, stories of someone employed at the Smithsonian, someone who went to work at the Ford Theater, and a number of other kinds of cultural organizations, museums, libraries. The Library of Congress was referenced. One of the first things we're going to need to do is to begin to think about where those cultural institutions are, not just at a big level like Smithsonian or Library of Congress, but at the local level. Where are the libraries that are influencing the communities? Where are the cultural institutions, the nonprofits, the private institutions? There are opportunities where not only is it an alternative to the academic employment, and by the way, I would actually recommend that we begin getting away from alt-ac or alternative to academic, because it's a binary that privileges the academic anyway. But there are pathways to employment, successful employment, fulfilling employment that capitalizes on the use of a PhD experience. That world is sort of amorphous to us right now. Academia has not thought about that world of the general public humanities. We need to do that. We need to begin to identify and we begin to network with those kinds of institutions. As we then, at the tactical level, inside of departments, begin to think about what the PhD can look like, I personally think it's going to be time to restructure and to accept that there will be a sacrifice. For example, a distribution requirement in a particular period will fall away, and it will be replaced by a professional seminar or another distribution requirement in the public humanities. One of the things that we're not well versed in as graduate students is the history of our own sort of path in education in America to where we are today. And there's a tremendous amount of literature out there. A number of the authors were referenced today, Martha Nussbaum, Andrew Delbanco. We could go on, who have talked about, in various ways, the crisis inside of universities, the crisis of the humanities. This has a long history, this kind of discourse about the humanities and the place of the humanities in higher education and in American life. That should be part of the training, and it should be complemented by what I will call field work, in a kind of very old-fashioned traditional field work style, pick your discipline, where our graduate students will go out and experience and work projects in those public spheres, in those institutions, as part of their coursework, as part of the development of the professional portfolio that could then mean employment outside of the traditional tenure track job model. Again, there's room for both. There's room for all kinds of applications and great value to be added. And one of the things that this kind of opening up, the aperture of possibility. One of the ironies is, as folks are reluctant to celebrate all AC positions, they're not recognizing that success in articulating and in positioning that kind of background, the humanities PhD influence, broadly in society will ultimately be better for the humanities crisis, will help to remedy this problem, will help to change the discourse, and will ultimately help those institutions who see this as a kind of second best thing you could possibly do, or worse. So what we all need to do is begin to recognize that the more we can infuse the humanities outside of the campuses and yet retain the skills, the knowledge, the passion, the person in the PhD, the better off we're going to be. And the better off our communities are going to be, the better our discourse is going to be, and it's the kind of discourse that leads to a better civic environment at the end of the day. So I see that we've got to begin tactically. We've got to move inside of current structures that are perfectly fine, but that can adapt and can adopt and can begin to interface and network with all of those wonderful institutions locally around the campus. And frankly, the opportunities then are almost endless in terms of the permeability of folks coming in from those public humanities spaces in to talk to graduate students, and graduate students going out and working in for periods of time those institutions.